Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me. So I am also a really big fan of paper and code and tech, so I'm very happy to be going right after Trish. And just so I don't forget my name, I always start my first slide presentation like this. Hi, I'm Kelli. I've already been introduced. I'm an artist and designer from Brooklyn, New York. And as a designer, there has historically been this duality in my work. The first part of what I do is I work a lot with data visualization and infographics, just trying to make relationships and processes and quantities visible and human parsable. And then the other part of my work is I frequently return to working with this painfully manual, handmade, physical things. So I do a lot of material experimentation. I love creating in-camera tricks and building like tiny rooms and stuff. I'm completely enchanted by the power of lo-fi magic. And much of like what we call lo-fi magic exists firmly in this realm of gimmicks and novelty that like you see it once, you realize it's a trick, and you're never fooled again. Like my cat like totally knows that's not a real wolf. But you know, there's this other side to things behaving in ways that surprise us. When we think about magic, we think about an experience that's beyond explanation. But I think the best magic tricks are ones that lead us to understanding the world more deeply. So this is a book I made that's based on research by a Swiss scientist named Emin Gabrielen, which uses Moiré interference patterns to create this illusion of magnification when you rotate it and animation when you move it back and forth. And this appears to be like a glitch in the material, but it's not. It's a glitch in how our eyes and our brains parse the visual world. This is the same thing that's happening here that happens when you're driving down the street and a car is like partially blocking a building and your mind fills in the gaps. And so here we're very methodically hiding and revealing things, and our brain perceives it as the circle's getting bigger and smaller. This is another technique I've been playing with. I've been using hydrophobic coating, basically Rain-X and stencils, to make these different shapes on glass plates and then turn it into animation frames. So it's kind of like, you know, I love this stuff because we all expect high-tech, high-production projects to wow us, but you don't really expect like a puddle of water to do the same. So that's really fun for me. So in these spaces where people expect nothing, I feel like it's the best opportunity to do something really surreal and kind of play tricks on them. And I learned this lesson from the first really big design project I worked on. I guess it was almost a decade ago now. This was a project that I worked on with my friend Steve Lambert that was organized by the Yes Men, and it came out of just being dissatisfied with the Bush administration and the Iraq War. Early one Thursday morning, we blanketed New York City with an alternative reality, one featuring a more benevolent type of alternative fact, one where the Iraq War ended, Guantanamo was closed, America now had train service that crisscrossed the United States, Appalachia got high-speed internet, we gave land back to Native people. We made economic policies that put the country on the path to equity, and we set the groundwork for a more informed future citizenry. So these are all just headlines in this paper, but the paper itself was carefully written as this roadmap for progressive victories that was all achieved through popular pressure. So like no single politician was going to do this. We would do this together by rallying together. Written in the exact same language as the New York Times. So we created this little utopian simulation where everything we wanted came true. It was like Christmas. And we did it not through VR or any kind of technology really, but just by like ripping apart the New York Times and really investigating what it's made out of. So we dissected it. We found a style guide that someone had foolishly forgotten to set to no index. So we found it through Google searching. And then we put it back together again as this pristine counterfeit depicting a utopian future better than our own. And we didn't bother telling the New York Times about this. We just mass-produced it. We silkscreened some really cute newsboy aprons to look very legit. And then we put it in the hands of hundreds of thousands of people one morning. So the hoax part of this worked really well because people could feel for a second like what a totally different world might feel like. All our volunteers were like, "Can I pass out in front of the Times?"
That's fun.
Some people were really mad, like throwing it in trash cans, but then they were on eBay afterwards for like $300. So we're like, oh. No, we didn't get sued. Basically, we released it as a group called Because We Want It LLC. We set up an LLC. We put $500 in the bank, and they released it in case we got sued. But no one sued us because it's legal. So, you know, we created this alternative reality that was fleeting, but our fake newspaper made it onto the real news all over the world. So we did get people asking, you know, well, if these headlines are bullshit, what other ways is the world ordered that doesn't necessarily deserve my respect? So, you know, for this brief magical moment, like all of these like fixed, rigid things in the world seemed a little bit more like open to negotiation. So, you know, working with paper, you know, it can seem like cute and crafty, but like it can also be like really subversive because, you know, design can be this wedge that opens up, you know, this expanded range of possibilities. You know, there's that cliche that, you know, design can change the world. I don't really know about that, but I think that expanded range of possibilities has the potential to like start the whole ball rolling. So, a more modest project, like newspapers, we also take humble things like cards for granted. So this is a simple card I made for my friends for the holidays. And like Trish was talking about, paper has a memory. It never forgets how it was bent, and you can use that material memory to make it perform and to guide people through experiences. So when people pick this up, it wants to flop in these very specific ways. And you quickly discover that like bending the card moves you through this simple story. And as you can see, it's like a story about itself. The card's a 4-frame documentary about receiving this card. Some Photoshop was harmed in the making of that. So it's about as simple as a material can get, really. It's a single piece of paper, printed on 2 sides. There's a couple die cuts and 2 glue dots. But still, you know, I made it, and I still have no clue how it works. Like, I understand it from frame to frame, but I can't hold the totality of it in my mind in 3 dimensions. You know, and I also, I constantly get this feeling when I do traditional graphic design projects, too. Even working on a menu, things seem like total magic. This is a menu that I worked on, and, you know, I just, like, have all of these questions about like what font's going to work best, what columns are going to work best, and sometimes things work and don't work, you know, and the cause and effect is a little bit unclear in those relationships. This is all for Russ and Daughters, which is a 104-year-old advertising store in New York City's Lower East Side. So, you know, even though like having this feeling, which I think everyone experiences in their work, like gives a person this crazy imposter syndrome, I think it actually indicates that you're doing something right. I think it means that you're actually using design as a way to explore how the world works in ways that haven't already been done. You're not just like repeating history. Because there's always like 2 entry points into almost all knowledge. And the first entry point is this, you know, where everything has already been formalized into abstractions and math. This is the Wikipedia page for a Mobius strip. But the other entry point is the tinkering one, where you just make things. This is also a Mobius strip. All you do is take a strip of paper, fold it, twist it once, and then tape the ends together, and you've essentially made a little machine for turning a two-sided surface into a one-sided surface. And every third grader knows how to do this. So, it's one of those things that's vastly easier to understand in paper than on paper, and most of life is actually like that. So typically, this kind of knowledge comes first, and only later does someone do the work to formalize it into the abstract language of math and engineering. So, I realized that I could get much farther into thinking about complexity and systems in the world if I could find a way to translate it into that second type of knowledge where I'm actually tinkering with it. So every time I have a problem that seems too big and complex and intimidating to solve, should I take this job or not? I was well, I'll just make it into paper. So this is a paper calculator I made, and it's a format that's called a Vowel. Before there were computers or even calculators, there was still a need for calculation. So, if you're trying to figure out how many seeds of asparagus to buy, if you wanted to yield so many bushels of asparagus, in the fall, you can get out your farm calculator. This is kind of the apps of the 1900s. And the way it does the calculation is completely structural. So it does this with a series of nested and cut wheels. So you're basically taking the set of all possible outcomes, and this is a device for winnowing it down to one choice. On mine, which I call the existential calculator, it's programmed with social science research about what makes people happy in work, and what leads people to having major existential crises. So, and it basically boils down to these four main considerations and how those considerations interact with each other. So, what are the working conditions like? Are you being spoiled by your employer? Is it basically slave labor? Is this work going to improve things in the world? Is it a good fit? And what's the money like? So people turn these wheels to rate the job under consideration, and it spits out a little answer in the die-cut window, kind of like a mood ring. And then you find your color in the back and trace it out to the outer perimeter of this card, and all of the lines you go through are the conditions that apply to you. So, the advantage of this kind of format over a digital experience is that it's not all right, input, and I get one answer. You're able to see the entire spectrum from complete abject misery to work perfection, and wonder why you ended up where you were. And then you can go back to the front and negotiate where you want to be. So a lot of my friends have used these to figure out what job to take, and they're like, wow, the wheel really knew the truth. And I was like, well, it only knows what you tell it. It's kind of the secret of these things. Another abstraction that I wanted to figure out how to navigate with paper is I wanted to figure out if there was a way that I could feel how big the internet was, because I always hear these numbers there's 1 billion new images uploaded to the internet every week. And I'm every time I go online, it just feels like I'm walking into this room of uncertain size. So I was inspired by Christian Marclay's The Clock. Has anyone seen that piece? Oh, good, so I'm in the back. So I wouldn't recommend running out and seeing it now because it's a 24-hour-long film where each minute of the day is represented by a piece of footage of someone looking at their watch. And so at 5 a.m., there's some, damsel that's hitting her alarm clock. And then at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, someone in Grand Central glances at the clock. So every single minute of the day. And so I walked out of seeing this film thinking oh, this is a really good way of seeing exactly how much film exists in the world. If you can make a film like this where every single minute is represented, then we have a lot of film in the archives. So I took inspiration from this and I was like, well, I wonder if I could make frames from the internet and recreate a film about scale. And so the only film about scale that I know of is the Eames's Powers of 10. So I set out to do just that. I looked at every frame in the Eames's Powers of 10, trying to match it with something I found in Google image search. So at the beginning of the film, which goes from a guy on a picnic blanket out to the far reaches of space, it starts with all these like hands on stomachs. So I ended up kind of like down all these rabbit holes about bulimia on the internet. It totally sucked. I was much happier when I got into like NASA's footage of the Earth. But I started piecing it together, and it did create this sense of like all these discontinuous pieces coming together and creating continuity. So, and this is how it turned out. So you can kind of follow it, right? Yeah, and honestly, like, in feeling out the internet's vastness, the hardest images to find are images of one person on a picnic blanket in the middle of the grass, because they're just like human behavior. Like, if it's a crappy day, there's no one out, and if it's a nice day, there's like 500 blankets, So this whole activity of making abstractions tangible probably seems like a really odd hobby for a designer, but there's this group of researchers at MIT that are also like feeling out these unsolvable problems in science and engineering right now. Eric Demain is really at the forefront of this. They call these problems folding and unfolding problems, which like a lot of problems in science and engineering are folding and unfolding problems. Like, what pattern should airbags best be folded up within a steering column to most rapidly unfurl upon impact? Do I have 8 minutes? It said that. Okay. Anyway, sorry. So, if you're interested in this, like the more nerdy side of this, there's recently a Nova documentary about his work called The Origami Revolution, which was really good. The New York Times also wrote this very in-depth article like 3 months ago about ladybug wings and how they work. They're deployable structures. We sent a car into outer space before we knew how ladybug wings work. So, interesting stuff. Anyway, so I think there's this implicit assumption that high-tech things are more sophisticated than paper folds, and that's just not true. So even though I'm a person who's always like coded since I was a little kid, I'm not a Luddite, but I shifted my practice to seriously thinking about the hidden complexity of lo-fi things in 2011 when I made this paper record player wedding invitation for my friends, and it went viral on the internet and people freaked out. So this is a project where we took direct design inspiration from Mr. Wizard, because we had all seen this amazing thing when we were kids, and we're like, oh, let's do that. What he did was he rolled up a cone of paper and taped it shut and taped a needle to the end of it, and that was enough to make a record player. So we decided instead of like letterpressing respectable grown-up wedding invitations, that we would instead send all of their friends paper record players. But then I had to actually figure out how to make it work. And so I bought like every needle I could find from acupuncture stores and sewing stores, and I started calling paper manufacturers, trying to find the paper with the best sound quality. And they thought it was crazy. Meanwhile, the bride and groom wrote this really cute song, and we had it pressed onto a flexi disc. And this is a clear flexi disc with black printing on it, and all of the colors on a layer underneath it. So that way, when you turn the record, you complete Karen and Mike in all these different scenarios, playing music together, and eating and drinking and being married. And this was basically like a fallback design solution in case the record didn't work. This would be a justification for like why we sent out this strangely formatted thing. But it did work, and this is how it worked. Obligatory invitation. You fold this page in half, and there's a needle right where that little red dot is. And you place it on the record, and then you turn it at 45 RPM. Oh, you can't hear it. Sad. People in the booth. Well, the last slide is my internet information. You can find it there. But
we'll also have it on the website.
Okay, cool. It'll also be on the website.
We'll try to queue it up by Q&A.
Okay, cool. This is gonna replay. So, anyway, it really worked. But it was the funniest thing because like I uploaded it to the internet and people like really freaked out about it. And I was like, we're all sitting around complaining that there aren't like obscure albums in Spotify, and yet you like this thing that plays one song and it doesn't even play it well, and people were like in love with it. So I was like, there's something here. And I think that there really is this weird dimension in our relationship with our things that modern tech doesn't quite get yet. And it has to do with this realm of the tactile. You know, modern tech is very focused on what tech is supposed to be focused on. It's supposed to ease the burden of humanity and do our work for us, and give us more time to be human. But, you know, what good is all of that bonus time if we're disconnected from the best parts of being human? You know, experiencing the world through our senses. As human beings, we intellectually think about the world through our bodies and through touch, I think, much more than it's acknowledged. The nervous system doesn't end with the brain alone, it extends all the way to the skin. So all information, not just the touchy-feely stuff, flows in through our senses. This is something I thought about a lot when I was designing a ton of infographics. Data visualization is essentially an attempt to bridge the gap between numbers and human experience, so to make information bioavailable. Brett Victor writes about this a lot, how the scatter plot graph was actually this very significant human invention, because before you had all of these charts of numbers, which you cannot feed into the human brain, you just can't parse it. But as soon as you put it on something that approximates a map, that we can navigate spatially and think about the relative distance from one point to another and the patterns that they make and experience it like that, all of a sudden you're able to understand things that it's difficult for a computer to understand. So I think that, you know, that old mechanical tech, you know, it's fussy and it's glitchy, but it forced us to interact with the world more of the, you know, sort of underlying infrastructure of the world. By having noise and by showing the scenes, we accidentally interact with things like gravity and sound and time, just a lot more. Yeah, and so I think it just connected this stuff better. All of these stop motion animations are things that I made for Tiny Bob. They make apps for children that teach them about how the world works. So, you know, I think what people really liked about this is that it connected the intellectual knowledge that they had in their brain with that sound is vibration with touch, you know, that they could actually turn it and connect like the syncopation of those record grooves with what they were hearing. So nowadays, as a designer, I do this. You know, I try to provide as little as I can and allow the magic to be in the interaction, what people complete when they experience my work. And I've been teaching myself paper engineering these last 2 or 3 years, and I've been putting that into pop-up books. So this is the first pop-up book I made. This is published by the Museum of Modern Art. It's called Bespoke is a Camera, which is a super literal title because it is a camera. That's how it works. So you load up photo paper in a dark room or closet, and then you take it outside and you lift this little thing and it opens this dark slide and it allows light to come through the pinhole, hit the photo in the back, and then you go back in your closet and you develop it in instant coffee and baking soda. And you get these photos that look perfectly like straight out of the 1800s, but they're modern New York. This is from on top of the Whitney Museum, and then this one is on the Brooklyn Bridge. So hopefully you'll see more and more people looking super cool in public places while everyone else is using their smartphone. Oh good, freeze on me looking dumb. Okay. So last October, Chronicle Books here in San Francisco published my second book called Bespoke is a Planetarium, also very literally titled. Although there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. There's 6 different tech gadgets that are reduced down to just paper. And the point of this is to not only get people and kids to poke at things and say, like, how does this work? But then also, why does it work? There's nothing there. There's no parts inside. So this is the book trailer I made for it. Yeah, so that was a big project. And now it's like it was so hard to get it done, but it was like really touching now because people send me pictures of their kids all the time. They're like, they won't go to sleep without looking at the planetarium. Yes, we're making weird scientist artists. Yeah, so this is basically the end of my presentation, but like now I'm working on things like this, which if you remember the Miori Ori fold from the last talk, it's called an exotic metamaterial. These are shapes that don't exist in nature, but if you fold them in one direction, rather than stretching just left-right, they also stretch up-down. And this is like a more complex, like three-dimensional version of that. So I'm really super interested in those forms. And I'm doing a workshop at the Exploratorium the first week in August. It's going to be free, so come to that. Okay, so this is my last slide. These are my favorite lo-fi magic things that have transparency that you can take apart, ask it how it works, it will tell you. Things that if you take it apart, it does no good, because they still don't make any sense, they're just magic. There is a guy at Stanford who made a paper microscope called a Fold-tastic, which costs like 50 cents. And so he's pioneering this idea of citizen science, that like, what happens if you don't have microscopes in just a couple institutions around the world, but instead give them to kids? You know, like what kind of data do you get? You know, is it better to get more low-quality data from more sources? Like, do we learn more and different things about how the world works? So all of this is pretty cool stuff. So this is where you find me online, and at the break, I'm going to be sitting at the VMA table, and I'm selling and signing books, and I'm answering questions, and you don't have to buy anything, just come over and like play with the books too. So thank you all so much.